I know you're comfy. I know it's a rainy morning and you probably have your favorite beverage nearby. But try to make it down here and join us in person. There is the X factor of being in the physical space that you just don't get over a monitor. So we would encourage you to engage with us personally, physically. It's another way of saying no more to this pandemic that hopefully is beginning to whimper and fade away. So let's start to try to move in directions that illustrate that, and perhaps we can speed that process up. And on the note of speeding up, that's kind of where we're going this morning. This speeding up process is really what the spiritual traditions are designed to do at their heart when they're used constructively and properly. They're meant to accelerate spiritual consciousness evolution. In fact, one of the early transmissions that came through Helen Schuckman, the scribe of A Course in Miracles, was Jesus telling her that these teachings were designed, in his words, as a celestial speed up, that those with a strong will can actually collapse time more and more effectively, lessening the need for time, lessening the need to experience the blowback of karma. And so we are really, in a sense, at the driver's wheel when it comes to our spiritual evolution. The choices that we are making are either accelerating us or slowing us down. And sometimes our choices also bring us to a state of temporary arrest or maybe even temporary devolvement. So everything is navigated through intentionality and choice. And we are moving through these invisible spaces of consciousness, bringing in the effects of our thoughts that will then manifest in the outer world and through the dynamics of our relationships. That's why way back, we were looking at one of the teachings of the Mahasiddha Naropa. And Naropa said something very profound in that teaching. He says that your life is the path, and the path is the guru. Take that in. Your life is the path of awakening. There's nowhere you need to go. You're on the path. And you're navigating this path through choice. And the path is actually fine-tuned to be your guru. In other words, things that cause you pain and discomfort or upset are pointing you towards where you're out of focus. They are reflecting back to you your own imbalances. And so when you learn to read the signs and recognize the information that's coming to you, not from your monkey mind that's always jumping and busy, but from that quieter place, which is why we often emphasize the importance of quieting down and settling the mind in order to hear the voice of the guide, which is speaking clearly through the people and through the events of your life. That way you can begin to learn how to navigate, how to unblock from these attitudes and judgments that have been holding you back from evolving. And you begin to release these blocks and open up the way of evolution for yourself: happiness, joy, abundance, flow, ease, rewarding relationships. All of this comes in the immediacy of your own life experience. You don't have to go anywhere for this. And the guru is meeting you every moment. So that's what we want to really get into this morning, is really learning how to cultivate deepening sensitivity and knowing how to read the signs and how to, in some sense, take our power back and bring greater light into our life, into our mind. And this is something that, again, he'll say in A Course in Miracles, that this course is all about integration. And what he means by that is we have been throwing our light out, projecting it. And we've often projected it in its maladaptive, miscreative forms. Blame, judgment, guilt, hatred, grievances. So when we're having these things show up on our path and we're not hearing the voice of the guru, these are parts of ourself that are getting locked or trapped, stuck in these events and people. And you could see that if you look through your timeline of life, you've had a lot of times where you've thrown out your projections and your judgments on certain people. And what they're saying in these spiritual teachings is your essence or your power gets trapped or blocked, frozen in these spaces and in these life situations. And as you move along in your life track, you're losing power. You're losing the ability to co-create. You're losing your ability to overcome the challenges in your life because your light and your power keeps dimming, because you're throwing things of yourself out as blame and judgment and hatred and fear and guilt and anxiety, etc. So this course, he says, is a course in integration. In other words, you're going to go back and open up these spaces where there were the grievances, the held blocks and guilt, etc. And you're going to see through the reinterpretation of the guru in you how these blocked patterns within your life are actually teaching you about yourself. And you'll be able to heal what's often called, lost will. We're going to be looking into this morning. Your will is your power. Your will is your essence. And you lose it when you fragment and think it's somebody else's fault or somebody did this to you or you had no power to stop that situation from happening. These things will be brought back to you for reassessment. And through the voice and guidance of this inner light, Holy Spirit or Guru, you will open up these spaces that you felt were outside of you when all it was a projection from you. And you'll take your judgment and your blame or whatever it may be and reintegrate the energy of your own will and release the blame, the judgment, the attack as you had previously perceived it. And that will add to your light and it will increase the power of your will. And so this would oftentimes then lead to a reintegration, as we're going to see, of your will with your spirit. So we're going to get into some of these distinctions here in just a moment. So your will is oftentimes referred to as your intuition, your feelings, your emotions, right? And your spirit is that bright, clear awareness. And what's happened here in our earth journey for many, many, many of us is that there's been a disconnect, a separation between our spirit and our will. And this shows up within our understanding of how the chakra system operates. If you're familiar with the chakra system, I think it makes it very clear. See, in the first three chakras, many of you know, you have at the root of the spine and the coccyx center in an energetic, subtle body, what's called the Muladhara Chakra, the root base. And this is your grounding into physicality, and it's the consciousness that's built within the material energy. Then you go up the spectrum into the sacral center, and this is where you feel and emote and have relationship dynamics and sexuality and procreative tendencies. And then you have in the third level, the solar plexus, you have the will, the identity as a separate individual. Now, most human beings live within these three fields of embodiment: survival, sexuality, and ego-aggrandizement. And that is the end-all and be-all of life for many, many people. And it's all within the spectrum of the material energy. So we're cut off in our conscious awareness from the higher spectrums of light symbolized along the spinal axis with the heart, the throat, the third eye, and then the crown. The crown is the spirit. And so the whole journey of the seeker, the one who wants to wake up, is to go from the root of the body identity all the way up into the flowering of your spirit identity. But along the way, you're going to encounter a necessary shift in consciousness going from the third chakra to the fourth. Because what this symbolizes is you're opening up from an isolated identity to a universal identity. Your heart chakra is the chakra of compassion. It's the chakra that begins to reintegrate the lost will and to open you up to a balancing between the lower chakras and the higher chakras. They actually come together at the heart. The heart is the nexus, the epicenter, where the higher spectrums and the lower spectrums of consciousness merge. It's the eros gamos in the Hermetic alchemy, the sacred or alchemical marriage. The mother is the lower will force, not lower, but the will is oftentimes symbolized as the mother, the Shakti. And the father is the Shiva, or the spiritual force. And they merge and marry within the embodiment of the child, who is the third in the balancing of that relationship, and thus giving birth to the cosmic child, or the cosmic Christ, who integrates all the spectrums and embodies them in their fullness. This is your destiny, according to all of the sacred wisdom traditions of the world. Taoism, Buddhism, Sufism, Christianity, Kabbalistic Judaism, etc., etc. These secret teachings of giving birth to you as the light body or the cosmic child, as a fully integrated person, where you have and are everything. This requires, at the stage that we currently identify as, this reintegration process. We have to take back what we've thrown out. And we have to understand there are some things that we've let into our minds that have derailed us and caused increasing separation between our feelings and our spirit. So we're going to learn some of this morning, and I hope it's helpful for you. Are we good? We're ready to ride? Okay. So why don't we just prepare the mind by settling into that heart space. And remember, everything is navigated through intention. So it doesn't matter what you did a minute before you got here this morning. Your intention will open up these spaces for communion and healing for you if you get out of the repetitive habit of judging yourself or wanting to judge others. So make this a new moment for yourself. Let the past go to the best of your ability. Find that breath, and with your intention and your focus, allow that inner place within the temple of the heart to become increasingly more sensitive. And so, just with a collective intention here, we are ready and willing to undergo the necessary transformations within our spirit, within the subtle spaces of our mind and our life, to experience this radical new birth or new identity that is really our ancient self. So we want to just prepare the mind in this state of childlike trust, what in Zen is called beginner's mind. Simply opening and holding nothing and allowing the higher truth to come in as it wills. And on our part, to be flexible and sensitive to undergo the necessary subtle shifts within our intention, within our willingness, and to be guided through imagery and sensations to undergo this release of the blocks and this reintegrating of our own power and divine will. And so in this collective identity of the higher self, it is already complete, and we claim that for ourselves now. May it be so. So I brought along an interesting book. I've brought this into service some years back, and here it is again. Right Use of Will. I don't know if anybody's familiar with these teachings. There's a lot of good in them. And you know what we were saying earlier about how these teachings are coming as a speeding up process for us to evolve faster, to open to our shared inheritance as loving entities in God consciousness. Well, these teachings are really designed to have us speed up so that we let go of who we're not and accept and embrace who we are. And so these right use of will teachings are actually describing themselves much in the same way as we see in A Course in Miracles, as a teaching to speed us up. And in the introduction to this book, this is stated: the unconditional love of the Spirit for everything that exists has been understood on earth for quite some time. This, in fact, has been called divine love. Now there is need for another understanding on earth, that of divine will. Most people on earth have made a separation between their spirit and their will. They have believed their own will was not acceptable, and that to love in the way that God loves, they must eliminate their own feelings and opinions and do what they have imagined to be the will of God. An understanding is needed here. The will of God is not in opposition to the will of the individual. So there's no imaginary will of God. Just like we've looked at on our Thursday night Zoom classes in A Course in Miracles, we've had a few classes that focused on the will of God. And in A Course in Miracles, he makes it abundantly clear there is only one will in creation. That means that you are the will of God. Your will is the will of God. But because of separating ourselves from our higher identity, we're out of focus. And because we've let in feelings of guilt and lack and suffering and anger, our will gets skewed. Our feelings become out of focus with our higher identity. And then we begin to feel guilty and that we have our own self-will when it's really the divine will being skewed. So that means that it's not about imagining a will of God that you then have to give your power outside of you to a church authority or a holy book or something like that, where now you have to deny what you feel. What these teachings are saying, much in keeping with A Course in Miracles, is you actually have to go into these feelings and see the fear and the guilt and the upset and the anger and the sadness and whatever else. And in the process of doing that in the right way with the guru or guide along with you, you can open up these spaces again and release the judgments that you had about yourself. that have kept you stuck in these dysfunctional patterns, thereby allowing your will to reintegrate into the higher spectrums of consciousness and join your spirit, thus making you the cosmic child in full integration. Is that clear? Each person must take responsibility for his or her complete being, and not only a part of it. The will expresses itself as feelings, emotions, receptivity, intuition, and desire. Each spirit must fully accept its own will and help it evolve in a loving way that is not punitive, judgmental, or condescending. When the individual will feels that it truly has the loving acceptance of the Spirit, it will be able to come into alignment with the Spirit. So God has given each individual a part of his divine consciousness with which to have awareness, and a part of his divine will to feel what this awareness is experiencing. Everyone now must accept the whole being and discontinue denial of the part of the self that feels what the spirit is experiencing. Instead of denying your own will in favor of someone else, or in favor of what you have believed to be the divine will, it is necessary now to realize that denial of the individual will has been a misunderstanding that has resulted in a split in the consciousness of individuals on earth. And we're seeing this. This is why we were saying at the outset of our conversation, this is a speeding up process. We're seeing the slow steps of this evolution taking place where, the age of faith was supplanted by the age of reason, where the mythologies of Christendom got eclipsed by the scientific enlightenment. And no longer was it considered high philosophy to think how many angels dance on the head of a pin, but rather, what are the secrets to the atomic realm and biological realm and the sociological realm, and how do we fit all of these chemicals into a systematic understanding of chemical material evolution? So the pendulum swung from the faith realm to the realm of reason. But then that also, in the modern sense, began to break down. Because what we began to realize is, yes, there was a step in the right direction with getting rid of the mythologies and the superstitions and, catering to authorities that told you what to believe. And it was now based more on experiment and direct looking, but only within the material realm. And what we began to see as we looked at this was not only was this a very limited view of life, but science, too, became a dogmatic religion. Scientism is the belief that only material reality and only the five senses are where reality can be experienced. That is actually a faith assumption. And so what began to happen through this deconstruction or postmodern period was we began to see that materialistic scientism was very much like religion in the sense that it's a story. It exists with language and concepts. It doesn't really prove anything out verifiably that its truth claims that you are only a material entity are completely valid. So what we've come to now is a lack of trust in much of the outside authority. So we're beginning to take our power back. This is why it's a slow crawl for many of us, but if you begin to pick up footprints, you'll see it. Most people nowadays don't take authority outside of themselves. And the authority figures that still have some semblance of power really do help us along by, discrediting themselves every chance they can. They're basically screaming at us, don't believe anything we say. So what you want to recognize then is this is starting to really crystallize, that the power center is transferring back to you. You're the arbiter of your reality because in truth you're making your reality. And whatever story you believe in becomes real for you. That's why you'll never convince somebody that God doesn't exist or, the truth claims of science are false. If they're bought into that, there's nothing you can do to shake them from their belief. People identify with their thought system. They become their thought system. So if you attack their thought system and try to discredit it, they take that as a personal attack. So all that really needs to be focused on here is we must take responsibility for ourselves and not try to convince anybody else until we fully remove that plank out of our own eye. So a little more on this line of thinking here, the right use of will. One of the empowering factors in these understandings is that you can release yourself intentionally by allowing free expression. This then eliminates the need for any harmful situation to come to you from outer reality. This is an understanding that is very necessary now on earth. People have thought that karma brings a balance of payments, but karma is not that simplistic. Karma is meant to bring you into balance. That is true. But not by bringing one experience as payment for another in the past. Karma brings balance by attracting the experiences you need in order to learn what you do not yet know. Get that? It's not an eye for an eye reality. It's that you're encountering these experiences of life the way you are in your own personal reflections because they are there designed specifically to teach you what you need to learn in order to get back into balance. They're not punishment. They're poking at you to have a good look at yourself and see where you need to adjust. So without will, right, this feeling, intuitive dimension of yourself, your awareness or spirit has no selection process. It's just pure awareness. Your will is your individual magnetic energy field and draws the experiences you are going to have. So if you're in denial and you have lost will and you have anger and resentment and fear and anxiety, guess what? That's in your magnetic energy field. And it will bring manifestation of those experiences, not as punishment, but because they're in your energy field and thereby showing up as reflections in your outer world. That's why he'll say in A Course in Miracles workbook, there's that lesson entitled, I have invented the world I see. If you hold something in your will that is denied and disconnected from your conscious awareness by not being accepted and allowed free movement or free expression, you will then draw a reflection of this to yourself. Unpleasantness is not sent by God's loving light as punishment for missed deeds. Unpleasantness is only drawn in response to what has been denied or judged against. The denial is what gives the experience its unpleasant qualities. So One of the denials that I'm really getting over is, politicians are corrupt liars. And one of the things that I'm seeing in my life now is I don't have that reflection showing up anymore. I'm not bringing that into my field to look at and judge, and thereby I can release that pain. This is something I think is going on in a collective level where we are creating these unpleasant situations because a lot of our favorite people to hate, and for me in the political sphere, I used as scapegoats to hold my lost will reflections. I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at this in myself. I don't want to look at my own hypocrisy. I don't want to look at my own ambivalence to truth where I compromise sometimes. I don't want to look at how maybe, if that person didn't charge me for that, then that's God blessing me. So I can get, gain from, in a way, stealing. All of these things will be found out when you begin to take responsibility and take back your reflections that you have on your favorite people to hate. And that will bring a shift from unpleasantness to pleasantness. It will change your world. It's not to say that those politicians won't still behave the way they are. Right? A scorpion that gets on the frog's back, telling the frog that it's not going to sting it as it needs to get across the river just like the frog does. The frog thinks, well, the scorpion's not going to sting me because it too will die if we're in the water. Well, halfway across, the scorpion stings the frog. And the frog goes, why did you do that? And the scorpion says, I'm a scorpion. Beings follow their nature, as Krishna says in the Gita. What can restraint do for them? It doesn't mean that you have to use them to hurt yourself. They have to take responsibility for their own reflections. And we're going to find out how this confusion got caught up in our own psychology and how it really added a deep rift within the split between our feelings and our spirit, where we began to actually think that we were responsible for the scorpion behavior. We're not responsible for the scorpion behavior. Just because you're not going to judge a pedophile and that you're taking your power back from feeling anger and rage for a pedophile doesn't mean that you're a pedophile. It just means you're not going to use the pedophile to hurt yourself and block love. Everyone must bear the fruits of their own actions. And by bringing more love in, you can actually be this compassionate being without validating maladaptive and harmful behavior, ever. On that note, he does have something very powerful to say. It says, an understanding is needed here that the difference between loving essence that has been denied and the denial of loving essence. So an understanding needed here is that there is a difference between loving essence that has been denied and the denial of loving essence. Catch this now. Loving essence that's been denied is that we projected our light and it got lost in our judgments, and these judgments got fixed and frozen in blame and fear and hatred and attack and special enemies and hatred, etc. And we've disconnected ourselves from that part of ourself, which is actually love, out of focus and skewed, in a state of ignorance. What we're here to do is release those judgments and unblock so that flow can melt. Remember we said there's no difference between Buddhas and sentient beings? It's like ice and water. A sentient being is a frozen Buddha. And so as we begin to melt our ice, we begin to let this flow of our essence come back, and love will vibrate in our being again. Our frequency will go up, and we'll go up the spectrum of consciousness. We won't be held down in a weight of dense emotions anymore and blocked feelings that are not vibrating at the frequency of love. So that is what is the first part of that sentence. The denial of loving essence, right? The loving essence that has been denied. You're claiming it. You're bringing it back. You're releasing all of your judgments so that your loving essence can come back to you. And no longer are you fragmented and split and losing power. That's one thing, and you really got to get this. Because for many of us as spiritual beings, we skew the next part of it heavily. There is a difference between loving essence that has been denied and the denial of loving essence. The first seeks love, light, and life and has been mistakenly denied. The other seeks to escape love, light, and life and has been mistakenly pressured to accept it. A scorpion is a scorpion. You don't judge it for being a scorpion. You don't hate it for being a scorpion. But used figuratively, there are some human entities that are in a state of denying loving essence. And you'll see them by their fruits. Spiritual people are not meant to pressure or buy into thinking that they can rescue that scorpion spirit he calls a death spirit. Listen to this. I know it could be a little heavy, but I think you're going to feel it intuitively. Denial that does, let's say it here. This has been further confused by the fact that unconditional denial denies everything, including the fact that it does not want love, light, or life. Denial that does not want love, light, or life can be felt by the will. But the will needs to be allowed to tell you the difference here. Instead of being judged against as unloving itself for trying to bring awareness of this. So many of us have had these experiences over the years. We've met sociopaths and psychopaths that are in a psychological fix of denying love. They don't want it. They actually, and they've done studies extensively, sociopaths and psychopaths actually get joy from other people's pain. That's just how they're wired. They're scorpions in that sense. They're following their nature. Uncomfortable is this? I just sounded like Yoda. So this is really important to get. Many of us have had these encounters with sociopathic and psychopathic individuals, sometimes people who meant to harm us or were actively deceiving us, looking to do whatever they can to wreck our life, perhaps. And our will, our feelings, our intuition told us this. But we didn't allow or accept that because it's not nice to think about another person in such a way. It's not going to heal you. It's going to further block you from recognizing what things truly are in and of themselves. It goes on. The recovery of your lost will is going to be able to give you this information because the original undermining of the will was involved in this confusion. In other words, the way we got stuck or trapped in the first place in this descent into matter or separation was that there was an ego thought system, if we're going to draw on A Course in Miracles here, a mad, sick idea of hating God, denying God. And there are forms of consciousness that are totally identified as this. They embody it. They get joy from hating life. This is the difficult part of A Course in Miracles. I don't know, if you want to stick around and see this. But the idea here is we have to see this ego thought system for what it is, and this is where we got confused. We thought it wasn't loving to deny this denial within us. So he says many spirits judged that if they were loving enough themselves, they could teach others to be loving like they were. So what this person needs is just more love. And in some cases, that's true. If your will is giving you that guidance, great. But if you're getting a red light on a person, don't let your judgment or your pink paint spirituality override what your higher intuition is telling you. Many judged that God was not unconditionally loving when he told them they were making a mistake here. So your guru or your guide will tell you this. Undercurrent here was a judgment that these spirits were more loving than God. Another judgment many spirits made here was that in time, these unloving spirits would come around, that they were just slow. Another judgment made here was that every spirit was supposed to return to God. So the ones heading away from God were going in the wrong direction. The only other judgment to be brought forward now as a general judgment was that was made by everyone involved here, is that all of us judged against the will for feeling like it wanted these death-creating spirits outside of the creation. Reality is that this is what these death spirits seek, want, and need. So when I sat with this, you always take it back to real world stuff. Here comes another war. Have you ever looked at the casualties of war? Who in their right mind would ever want a war? And we spend trillions and trillions of our will energy in the form of money, because this is our lost will outside of ourselves that we're not taking back. And these death-loving spirits, which they are, only want more suffering on the planet. Again, not judging them, not condemning them, but they are not part of this loving creation if they're refusing it. We must take responsibility and see that we don't want to channel our will in this direction anymore. So by us healing in our own way, on our own life path, we're going to bring greater and greater levels of awareness. And I saw this show up in a little way where the spokesperson for the Department of Defense gave a press conference last week, and he's convincing or trying to convince the media that Russia is doing this false flag and they're trying to, really trump up the fear and maneuver for war. And one journalist pushed back and said, "Where's the proof of what you're saying?" And he goes, "I just told you." He goes, "No, you just told us this is what you think. You've provided no evidence, no facts, no truth of why we should mobilize for war. There's no proof that Russia's doing what that you say they're doing." And yet, most of the journalists will take that and write it as fact, and you'll read it in the major publications, and then we get programmed. We turn on our TVs, and we get programmed to think that this is what reality is, when it's just the machinations with no evidence. So this is what I'm saying. As you heighten your level of awareness, take your power back, reintegrate your energy that's been scattered and projected from you, and your light increases, you will have less and less tolerance for these war games. And you will see those who really want death, and we won't keep voting them into office. Whether they're red or blue, it doesn't matter. They're doing the bidding of a death intention. We're getting beyond this duopoly belief system. This has to come about. So here's something else along those lines then. So he's talking about young children here, but this is right in keeping with where we were. He says, when young children have been manipulated before they have found themselves, they can have a very difficult time finding their true self later. It can also be seen that television has such a strong grip on so many children because they do not have enough of any other engaging reality in their lives to counter this strong influence. Children's television programs, the advertising aimed at them, and even the educational programs all have twists and turns on judgments, programming responses and reality into children. And then he says this, the bright glowing colors of the television screen remind many children of the way colors look in other planes of existence that they still remember, and so that these bright colors attract them. It is known that children's minds open and receive the quick succession of projected images without having time to do anything other than take them in. A programmed reality is being presented to them in this way, and this reality is telling them how the world is and how to respond before they have the experience to know for themselves or can find their own responses. We're children in that sense. Oftentimes we're repeaters of the establishment viewpoint, whether red or blue. Watch it in yourself. You'll be a repeater. So then he says, watching large amounts of media-produced programming manipulates and impairs the development of a child's emotions and has been sidetracking the energy field of many people on Earth. Instead of projecting their own reality, many people have been helping to hold the patterns in place that have been given out by a few people. That's why they pay millions of dollars to drop things into your subconscious mind. You're holding these patterns in place. You're literally manifesting the sickness and the death of the few that want to control the many until you take your power back and wake up. Is this making sense? Is this too Debbie Downer? The grip of mass programming has severely reduced this evolutionary process to a very limited and linear progression of near sameness for every spirit incarnating, especially in the United States. Government has also participated in this. One of the ways to pressure for conformity is the passing of laws that force participation in mass consciousness and impede the freedom to experiment with other ways of living. Governments have revealed intent by choosing to enforce or overlook their own laws according to the situation and the influence it will have on their system. It has been to the benefit of those in power to have people programmed in such a way that they believe their personal power and strength are not enough to overcome the opposition. Instead of oppressing, government is meant to advise and bring balance to society in its healthy form. So again, taking our power back also means you're not going to give scorpions a ride. Right? You're going to see them for who they are, and you're not going to give your vote. I don't want to keep waxing political here, but one last thing, and that is the need for a third party. That eventually we get to see that both sides are bought and paid for by the donor class, and that they're not going to care a whit about the average person. And so we want to take our power back by having our own party represent us and our needs. This is an expression. See, this is where we make these spiritual beliefs so disconnected from reality. This is where the will and the spirit join and then are reflected in the world. A third party for the people, truly, would be our taking our power back and manifesting this integration within the greater world. So we'll leave it there for now. Blue bag's going to go around. Any thoughts or questions here? Annie. Joe, do you want to give her that mic so people don't complain on Facebook? Thanks, Annie. Appreciate that.
Okay. Turn it on.
You're on.
Okay. Taking back personal power has, around the world lately, in my eyes, been aggressive and involved a lot of additional conflict.
Mm-hmm.
How would you?
Yes.
How would you see it in another form, or reaching another form in which it
that is the messy transition phase. So whenever we are going to move in a new direction, we're going to have some of that messiness come in. You know, so it's just like, you know, if you want to start working out and you haven't worked out in a long time, there's the inertia. And you're going to confront all of the bad habits that have kept you on the couch rather than the gym. And you're going to have to face those so-called demons to move in the direction that you want to move in, which is a healthier direction. There are parts of the being that don't want you to move in that healthy direction. And the soreness and the struggle that comes along with getting on a health regimen is, in a way, reflective of how we have to break these old patterns and judgments and belief systems and work through some of that messy transition. The ego system isn't going to just say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, and here, come on in and let's change things. It's going to push back. But in that pushing back is your opportunity to evolve. So this is what we were saying, your life journey is where your guru will meet you. And as soon as you say yes to the plan of your own evolution, whatever meets you on the path, in whatever form, is there to evolve you. And your intention to go through it and overcome the challenge or the mess or whatever it looks like is you choosing life. You opening to your truth and not falling back into denial. So yeah, messiness oftentimes accompanies these early stages of change. Nice shoes. Just open to the place where we can recognize that this gift comes from the abundance within our hearts, and we charge this with the intention to bless and elevate all life. And so it is. Amen. Anybody else? Thoughts, questions?
I was just saying that removing the blocks, I love when you speak on that and make room for the Holy Spirit to manifest. And even Lisa promised that if you do that, you will see the miracle. And sure enough, two very stressful, for me, occasions, and just came as the light and didn't have any expectation of the outcomes, and just beautiful miracles. And so I think the application and really, it's a lot to take in when you're talking, but the baby steps and the willingness to apply what we remember, I like to say, is phenomenal. So thank you so much.
Excellent. And this is what we were mentioning earlier, that when you begin to see these opportunities as not punishment, like these people are not punishing you or causing you undue distress, they're here for your healing. And when you can reframe that, you don't have to keep repeating painful lessons. It's so enjoyable when we start to finally let that sink in. You know how he says in A Course in Miracles, no one has to learn through pain. If pain is showing up, it's a light on your dashboard to say you're out of balance. Adjust yourself. Recognize where you need to take responsibility. Recognize where you need to clean up or grow up or show up. All right. Anybody else before we close out? Final moments here. All right. Let's just close with the unity prayer. And before we do, remember tomorrow night, if you want to join us in furthering this kind of talk, 7:15 Course in Miracles class here in the classroom. And so we rest within the space of the Sacred Heart. And within the heart frequency, we have this bridging effect where all of our hearts connect in this communication network of love and shared identity. And so we just want to open to that collective self or collective soul, where we truly are in unity. And there in this state we can say the unity prayer with a deeper awareness. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful Sunday, everybody. Love you guys. Thank you so much.